There's an analogy, awareness and compassion is like the sun, the light of the sun and the warmth of the sun combined. So you can't really have one without the other.
Beautiful. Where'd you get that from?
From Andy, actually.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, because I think when they can be seen or viewed as separate. But actually, if you think about the light, the clarity you get from the sun, it comes with a warmth, and that's the compassion.
Yeah.
I'm deeply committed to, and not only, I'm protective of, these aren't things that just some folks made up 20 years ago. There's a reason they've been around for as long as they have, because they work. And you have to confront the dark side of the mind, and with joyous aspects that meditation can bring.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast with David Nichtern on the Be Here Now Network. My name is Michael Cammers, your host, monologist, and sometimes podkick. And all of us here at Be Here Now and Dharma Moon sincerely hope this podcast finds you as well as can be during these challenging times in the human realm. And that is one of the things I really appreciated in this discussion with David and our very special guest, Evelyn Lewis. They aren't avoiding the challenging things we experience in life in this conversation. They discuss the nature of suffering, how the ways we communicate and technology and our relationship with it can be poison or medicine, and how mindfulness can be an antidote for a lot of the challenges we are facing today as it shifts our relationship with ourselves, our experience, and the people we interact with. As you can hear in the two pull quotes up front, Eve has a deep relationship with the practice of mindfulness and an incredible ability to communicate the practice directly from her own experience. Eve is Director of Teaching and oversees Headspace's meditation curriculum and the introduction of new meditation teachers onto the Headspace platform. She's a certified mindfulness teacher who has been with Headspace since 2013 and creates many of the in-app meditations. She is passionate about teaching people the benefits of meditation and mindfulness, specifically around stress reduction, anxiety management, resiliency, sleep, and self-compassion. In her teaching, Eve draws heavily on the human experience, knowing that we are all going to make mistakes and that life really can change in an instant. If you like what you hear in this podcast and would like to connect with Eve, you can follow her on Instagram at meditatewitheve, as well as at her website, MBSR.com. That's D with two E's. And if this introduction hasn't been enough to pique your curiosity to continue with the episode, Eve drops a coupon code for a pretty substantial discount on a Headspace subscription later in the episode. Okay, I think that's enough for our intro. The table has been set. And now, it is our privilege and pleasure to share with you episode number 35 of the CSM podcast, A Mindful Headspace, with Evelyn Lewis. Enjoy!
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast. We have a special guest today who is a friend and meditation student, Evelyn Lewis Prieto. And she's also a principal teacher and content director over for Headspace. So she has a very important role in terms of making the meditation teachings available to a much wider array of people than we've been able to do in the past. So she's been doing a great job with that, and a serious practitioner herself. And we've talked for several years. She's also a graduate of the Dharma Moon Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Training Program. So she's one of our own, you could say, and from that perspective. And Eve, I just wanted to welcome you. This is delightful that we can get to talk this way, and thank you for doing this, and thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Delightful is a perfect word I would describe. You've been not only a wonderful friend, but my mentor, guide, teacher over the last 4-5 years, I think. So very grateful to be here. Thank you.
And we met in person when people still did such crazy things.
We did.
We had a teacher training program in Los Angeles, and Eve was a student there. And, it's funny when you know people over time, I can kind of visualize you then and seeing how you've kind of grown and to me, you seem sort of both more grounded and more expansive, since that time. And so there's two things I'd like to talk about. One is your own sort of sense of practice going forward, but also you have a very important role with one of the largest providers of meditation content for the Gen Pop, Headspace. So what's that like? First of all, how did you start working with them? How did that even happen in the first place?
Yes, it's a story of a sliding doors moment, really, an auspicious circumstance, if you will. So I got into meditation. I started meditating because of crippling anxiety. And I used to work in advertising many moons ago. And I was really struggling. I had, so this was my late 20s. I had been through a very difficult time in my 20s. There'd been a lot of challenge in my family. My dad had been struggling with an addiction. I'd been in a very toxic relationship, and I hadn't really processed any of that. And it was showing up as very intense anxiety, probably verging on some depression there, but I wasn't really able to identify really what was happening. I just thought that's how I'd been so used to feeling that way. I thought that's just how you felt, until it got to a point where I was really woken up. I physically woke up with this huge rash all over my neck and my hands, my face. And it was as a result of stress. I wasn't sleeping. I'd lost weight. I was just in a very dark place. And a friend of mine had suggested I try some meditation. And I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical, a bit judgmental, thinking, I don't need that. Really, it was coming from a place of ignorance. I knew very little about it, only from what I perceived these practices to be, religious, spiritual. You wore special robes. And because back then it just wasn't as mainstream as it is now, or accessible. Anyway, I went to an in-person class. I'll never forget that.
Eve, what year are we in about?
Let me think, 2010.
So 12 years ago. Roughly.
Yeah, 2010, okay. I think.
Okay.
My sense of time has warped. But yeah, I think around 2010. I went to this class in East London. It's a London Buddhist Center. It was packed. And I remember thinking, gosh, this is, even though it was at a Buddhist center, it was just everything that I wasn't expecting. It was a great teacher. For the first time, wish I could remember their name. For the first time in, I think, my whole life, I realized I didn't need to feel the way I was feeling all of the time. I grew up as quite an anxious kid, as an anxious child. I think I run anxious, I would say. And from then on, I knew that meditation would be in my life. And shortly after that, maybe I've been meditating for a few months, maybe a year, and Headspace came on the scene as an app, as a digital experience. And a friend said they were in The Guardian with this article about them. I thought, okay, I'll give this a try. And I've been practicing with Andy Puddicombe, who's our founder. And I remember thinking I had this, epiphany one day. I was going to quit advertising because I really didn't enjoy it. It was very thankless work, very stressful. And I was going to train as a Pilates teacher. I was like, I've always wanted to take care of, mind and body. And I felt like I'd found a place for myself, a calling, if you want a better word. So I quit my job. I was going to freelance and do this training. And I was having a conversation with one of my closest friends who was asking how I was doing. She knew I'd been struggling a lot. And I told her my plans and just happened to say, have you been using Headspace? And it's really, but doing meditations really changed my life. I'd love to work for somewhere like Headspace. And turns out she used to live with Rich, who's our other co-founder.
Oh, goodness.
Oh,
Tendril, right? We're always talking about auspicious coincidence.
Yes.
That would be one, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
And let's just say I never did the Pilates training. Instead,
Yeah.
I got a job at Headspace in 2013, I think it was.
Well, you had the contact in. So
I had the contact.
She connected you with the,
yes,
with Rich or with the management team?
With Rich, yeah. And this was back when there was, under 10 people at the company. And so it took a while to hear back from them. I think they were very, very, they didn't really know what they needed. And so I sent this letter in and didn't hear anything for ages. And then got an email saying, can we meet with you? And I'd already started my Pilates training, actually. So I did start a bit of it. And I was like, yes, of course. And then didn't hear anything again for a while. So it took a bit of time to get my foot in the door, so to speak. But eventually it happened, and it'll be 10 years next year.
Well, that's a long time to work for a single company. That's a real relationship. That's a marriage. Yeah.
It is.
So, and it went from 10 people. How many people are employed now by Headspace? We
are combined with Ginger, who we've just merged with.
Mm-hmm.
So now Headspace Health. We are, I don't know the exact number, but over 1,000.
Wow. That's quite a growth.
Yeah, it is. It's just remarkable to see the transformation and just the evolution, honestly. When I started, I don't think any of us really knew what we were doing other than a commitment to practice and supporting ourselves and, out there in the world. So to see the app evolve, we now have multiple teachers on the platform. We're reaching so many millions of people, which is just, that's what keeps me here at this company, honestly, is that we are helping people with their mental health.
And are you teaching the same technique that you yourself learned right at the beginning there? When you started meditating for Headspace, was it mindfulness meditation that was what you were presented with as a practitioner?
Yes.
And has it changed? Are you teaching the same method basically, would you say?
More or less. I mean, in going through the Dharma Moon, I know it wasn't exactly Dharma Moon then, but the teacher training intensive with you,
right.
It's only my understanding and B, knowledge of these practices has expanded. And so with my teaching, it's rooted in mindfulness. And I've just finished a qualification through UCSD Center for Mindfulness for MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. So, which is rooted in, insight, meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's rooted in those first practices that I learned as a practitioner myself. And
you can't really just take these teachings and go off into a kind of cave or a forest, can you? I mean, the way that we're being exposed to it.
Yeah, I was asked a similar question the other day, and it was something along the lines of, why do you think the need for meditation and mindfulness practices has increased?
Mm-hmm.
Without stating the obvious. And, I thought about this, and the need has always been there. Always. I think we forget that.
That's good.
But it's, if we were talking about this just earlier, there's just so much suffering around us. So much, just on an unimaginable scale. And it's also hard to even just comprehend the amount of suffering that we are witnessing. And so, I can't remember who I was speaking to. It was, I think it was a journalist, and they were saying, 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you didn't have the same access to news 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of, we are witnessing
Right.
trauma and destruction and violence every single day. Whereas before, we didn't. You would watch the news at a certain time in the day. And even the evolution of digital media just means it is instantly accessible. And through video, and this has been a huge increase in the last even just 3-4 years, people are capturing things on their phones, instantly posting. So you're witnessing extreme violence, which is why increases of PTSD, trauma. There is just so much in the world that is difficult. And it's not that it's not always been there. It's so much more visible. So on one hand,
it's like our eyelids have been peeled back.
Yes,
we don't have eyelids anymore.
Yeah,
and in a way, it's creating a lot of trauma for young people. I think to have this much overwhelming load, and I think about it because I date back to just right after World War II. I popped into this particular situation. 1948.
Date marked.
Yeah, and my dad just back from the war.
Yeah.
And, 75 million people were killed in World War II. 76 million Jews were incinerated in World War II. It's not like we're in in some sense, we're in a better situation than for part of the time. I lived through a time when we would, in third grade, we would have a drill, an air raid drill, and in New York City, which is where I grew up, and you'd have to get under your desk. You'd crawl under your desk, and because for a nuclear attack. And even at 8 years old, I thought this is stupid. You're saying a nuclear weapon's going to drop in New York, and I'm going to be okay because I'm underneath my little desk with those little ink holes, ink wells in them? No way. So I, as a perspective holder from just longevity, go, I'm not sure it's that some things we're experiencing are so much different or so much worse, and maybe even better in some weird senses, but it's in your face. And what everybody thinks about everything is in your ears and in your face. It's like being inside a beehive,
Yeah, I think that's a huge difference. And you're right, in terms of genocide and mass loss of life in wars, as you said, has changed. But, I obviously wasn't around during World War II, but, my grandmother would speak to the fact that it would take weeks to hear information. Now you hear it in seconds.
Yeah.
And you see it on younger populations. The rates of stress, depression, suicide in teens has never been higher. And obviously, I think social media plays a role in that. Lack of identity, hiding behind filters, and this sense of self, putting this different self out into the world than the real one.
Eve, let me ask you this question. Sorry for just jumping in.
No,
but,
of course.
The fact that the antidote, which is this mindfulness antidote, is being delivered through the same system that is creating this kind of information overload.
Yeah.
How is that working? In other words, I'm sitting there with my phone and I'm getting my transmission of the awakened state of mind through that same portal and gathering data points about it and talking to other people about how mindfulness is. When do you put it down? So when you're using the Headspace app, do you put the phone down at a certain point and actually meditate, or are you meditating with the phone the whole time?
A few points there. And really great to bring up. And we get asked this. I get asked this a lot. We get asked this a lot. Going back to the intention of Rich and Andy when Headspace first was born. So Headspace actually started as an events company. Andy would do a day-long retreat, a weekend.
Live,
yeah.
Okay,
live,
wow.
In London and around, South UK. And overwhelmingly, the response from people who attended these events was, this is really great. How can I do it at home?
Okay.
And
People would
so,
actually would express that.
Yes, in the
Okay.
feedback.
Yeah.
And Rich, who used to work, he was an ad man, creative, very visionary man. He was really the had the inspiration behind our creative look and feel, our tone of voice.
Okay.
And so he convinced Andy to make it digital. And it took some convincing. I remember Andy talking about this. He says, no, it can't work. It needs to be in person. And Rich said, look, if our intention here is to try and make meditation, mindfulness, these practices as accessible as possible and as approachable as possible, we need to find ways that we can reach people in their homes who may not feel ready to go to an in-person class or a day or a half day or a weekend thing. So that's really how it was born, the digital version of Headspace. It was
born as an on-ramp concept, right? It wasn't like this is going to be the final solution. This is going to be how we get people interested and magnetize them into it in the first place.
I mean, yeah, it was an evolution of the experience, really,
right?
And that was very much driven initially by Rich. I think when Andy saw the impact we could have by putting it in an app, and gosh, that was 11 years ago. Yeah, I mean, apps were just becoming a thing,
right?
So we really hit at the right time around not only apps being something that consumers can interact with, but also there wasn't really any other digital offerings really around at that time in terms of meditation mindfulness. So that's the context. This jarring with technology and I can completely relate and sympathize. Sometimes I just want to throw my phone away. I think we all probably feel like that. I don't think technology is the issue. It's our relationship to it. And so, we have spent quite a bit of time. I've spent quite a bit of time talking about this. What are some, boundaries that you can put around the use of technology? So if you're in bed, try and get a traditional alarm clock. Don't use your phone as your way to wake up and go to sleep at night.
Oops.
I mean, of course, these are just suggestions.
Yeah.
And so, and for the most part, our phone stresses out. Emails, messages, social media, news. And so I actually have turned off all my notifications so that I'm not being constantly pinged. And so that when I do use the Headspace app or, when I meditate, I mainly meditate. Well, I do a combination, self-guided timer and then guided.
Yeah.
So when I'm using it, I'm thinking, well, this is something that's actually helping me. Most of the time, I have this hate relationship with my phone. I don't want to be on it. But when I'm using it for my practice, it has a really useful purpose. So yes, there is this tension between technology, apps and our usage of technology. And so I think I don't want to sound like I'm lecturing folks, but I'm sure we've all been in these scenarios where you think, oh my God, I've just wasted 45 minutes scrolling through Instagram. And people, and I'm sure you've had this countless times, people are always saying they don't have time to meditate. I don't have enough time. My life's so busy. Right up there with you. I don't have extra time, but could you spend maybe a little less time doing something? Maybe it's watching Netflix or doing less social media and use it instead. Use your phone for your mental well-being.
Yeah. Are you a Star Trek fan at all?
I am.
You are? Oh, that's cool.
I am. I mean, I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy fan. So anything that fits in that realm, yes.
There's some good, metaphorical content there, but I'm thinking of the Borg. Do you know who the Borg are on Star Trek?
Yes.
They're the communal, their minds are linked through probably technology to begin with, and then it just becomes part of your ordinary consciousness that you're part of a sphere. So I'm thinking of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who you know is sort of grandpa to a lot of the lineages that we've studied with. And, I hope people who are out there only live long enough to see a being like that and realize what the fruit is that grows on this particular tree when you experience that. But it's also a kind of a lost world, a lost horizon in a way. He was in a cave by himself for 15 years. And so were a lot of these teachers, up until the point where the contemporary lamas, who are also very well trained in a certain way, are online all the time, actually. Mingyu Rinpoche's whole portal is online.
He's very active online, yeah.
Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche is I actually was the music editor for a film that he did called Vara. So I spent work time with him and creative time, which was fun for me. Mr. Creativity, Spirituality, Making a Buck. I'm there with one of the great lamas of our time and making a movie, but he's got his iPad out the whole time and communicating with people. Sharon Salzberg, I hope I'm not telling you anything about these people that isn't just completely okay and fine. A lot of tweeting and connecting. So I think it's become part of the Borg. We're moving towards this kind of sense where this is part of our consciousness, not just hearing the people like in the neighborhood around us. You hear your neighbors and stuff. Our neighbors are everywhere, and we can hear over the fence, and it's just part of our everyday reality. So I don't know if there's going back. I'm more from the future than I am from the past, which is unusual. I don't have a romantic sense of the past at all. But the future is kind of got to have some kind of acknowledgement of the way we experience consciousness has shifted to a more Borg-like reality. And we just have to make sure it doesn't turn into that negative reality where people can't think for themselves. They can't abide in space or any kind of, sense of human body interactions. We got to protect that, don't you think?
Yes, I do. And as you were talking, I think one of the things I've really noticed that has suffered or been impacted is my physical writing with a pen. Wow. I at school, used to write letters. All of my exams written, and I was writing out a card for a friend, and I was so appalled at my handwriting.
Oh, no kidding.
And so it's actually inspired me. I'm going to take, I think, a writing class.
Yeah.
Because I don't.
What about calligraphy? Are you interested in calligraphy at all?
Possibly. I think more so for just, story writing.
Yeah.
But through, not just on my laptop.
Wow.
And because, the software, Google Docs and Microsoft and all these things, like they predict what you're going to say. So I was writing a sentence and it basically finished the sentence. And I was like, oh, that's great. And I made a couple of tweaks, but they're starting to think for you. And I think that's
I call this age that we're in right now the age of dumb robots, because they're not smarter yet.
No.
But we're on our way towards, a lot of people could describe this in different ways, but where the autocorrect is going to be like transcend a good editor, artificial intelligence. It'd be interesting to talk to people who are into the, you said Headspace is not a tech company, but in some sense it is. And in some sense, Dharma Moon is even a tech company. There's so much technology going on in our little world day to day. So the question is the tech tuning up to in a way that could be just something we haven't even fathomed yet in terms of how it all comes together, rather than, we got to balance it off. It's I'm a big music person, as you know, and watching tech in the last 35 years, I was involved with some of the transformation to digital technology in the music world. And I worked for this company that made this thing called the Synclavier, which is a digital music synthesizer, the very first of its kind that could reproduce cellos and flutes and,
cool.
with the original, and I had a major role in that iteration, just again through a kind of accident. But, the founder of that company, Eve, I was the director of Karma Chilling up in Vermont, and he came up there and meditated with us. And he was also an old-timey fiddle player. His name was Sid Alonso. And he would, when I saw what they were developing there, I couldn't believe it, because I said, this is definitely the future of audio industry and the music industry. So I got very involved. He asked me in a serious way 40 years ago, you have to understand this, David, would it be advisable if we could port the music right into your brain and bypass your ears? And it was a serious question from a highly technically adroit individual. We're not quite there yet. They're looking at dreams, they're tapping right into like you can see your dream on video. There's all kinds of tech stuff that's coming. I wonder, as a very successful tech company, there must be people at Headspace thinking about the future of consciousness and the interaction with technological devices. And, really, there must be a higher level of like, what is this going to be like in 20 or 30 years? Is meditation even going to be the same thing?
Yeah.
Are people talking about this at all, or not really?
Yeah, we have within the engineering team folks who are looking at how, particularly at the moment, how things like AI models can help with more personalized experiences. And
wow. Love to be a fly on the wall there.
Yeah, it's far too technical for me to understand, but we hear time and time again from folks, because, as you know, everyone comes to meditation for their own reason. It's very personal to them. Of course, there's lots of similarities and causes of why folks seek out things like these practices. But it means that we need to understand more about, what it is what will be helpful to someone, what they're looking for, what will keep them practicing, coming back. And I'd say it's always in our top 5 feedback from members, a more guided, personalized experience. Yeah. And so, we have folks working very, very hard, very, very clever folks working very hard on that.
To optimize the helpful experience that you're trying to engender there. How can we help people? Would that be the question? How can we actually assist and support and help people?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess if you strip it back, and again, this goes back to when Headspace first started, but Andy was teaching live sessions. He was able to interact with and speak to the people that were attending. So he had a sense of, the mood, what was going on. And of course, you really can only get that in an intense way in an in-person setting. So how do you take some of that, and then, of course, it's never going to be exactly the same. But if I open the app, how can we get it as close to a teacher who is there with you, who can answer questions, deal with concerns, help folks overcome obstacles, as close as possible. So, because, meditation it's not easy. It's not easy.
Fair enough. And from our training that's the biggest, we don't want to present it as if it's supposed to be.
Yes.
And that immediately separates you from the mainstream of Western culture right there. People will ask, gee, I'd like to learn how to play an instrument. What's the easiest instrument to learn? None of them. So this, and I want to ask you this about, there's a fruitional way to present meditation, which is it's going to help you. It's going to make you happier. They present Mingyur Rinpoche, the happiest person on earth. What is the message that's embedded? And we're a little bit of a stickler for like starting with the first noble truth and somehow not bypassing your way around that, which is the truth of suffering. And of course, from a marketing perspective, that's trickier, because you're saying, come come to our meditation class and get properly bored. Come and experience, your own relationship to your own state of mind and see how you're trapped in habitual patterns over eons. This is not exactly what the marketplace wants to hear. But at the same time, without acknowledging that, and without then the second noble truth of saying, what is actually the cause of that? There's no way to just leap over the hedge and go to noble truth number 3, which is that it actually is all workable. It is all something you can relate to in a more enlightened perspective, let's say, and therefore mitigate some of the unnecessary dimensions of it. But I light up every time I talk about the truth of suffering. I don't know, it's because I'm Jewish or why it is. I like talking about it, and I like looking at people's faces, and I particularly like the 4 kinds of suffering. Remember those?
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about, Dave? Not getting what you want. Getting what you don't want. Alternating between getting what you want and not getting what you want. I can't even win. When I lose, I win. And then 4th is all pervasive. It's just the ground hum of existence that things are just kind of like not really synchronizing.
Mm-hmm.
And to bypass all that, see, I don't know why. Maybe it's just, it feels like you're getting traction when you're introducing those kind of ideas to people, and then say, and we're going to work with that. You can work with that. You can make friends with all of that. You can use the resources that you have available to you to create a more harmonious, integrated relationship to the living situation. But what about skipping that first step? Is that? Do you think Headspace might skip that, or informationally? Do you feel like you're delivering that message to people? Like, yeah, sure, you got a headache. Yeah, you do. You're right.
I mean, absolutely, because where Andy trained as a Buddhist monk for 10 years, and
that's really incredible.
In the same,
and in a lineage that's completely adjacent to my own, right?
Yes,
that's because we go. You and I have talked about this, going back to Samye Monastery, where Trungpa Rinpoche was with Akong Rinpoche.
Yeah,
and was Akong Rinpoche his teacher?
Yes. Yeah.
So this is like really more auspicious than might meet the eye.
It really is. Yeah.
And the fact that you came from that connection, and it's so. But finish what you were saying. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons Andy decided to leave the monastery life, he was ordained as a Tibetan monk, and
celibate.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's the reason I'd leave right away.
he was at a crossroads, and he asked his teacher, I think Akon Rinpoche, and said, should I be doing this? Is this my path for the rest of my living life?
Sure.
And he was asked to go and do another year's retreat, and then they would talk again. I think that was the year he spent at Samye Ling, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And
was Trungpa Rinpoche still there at that time?
No, I think he'd left. He was already.
They didn't cross. He had already come to the west.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Although, so as you know, Akon Rinpoche sadly died, and his brother Lama Yeshe Rinpoche was now abbot of Samye Ling. And as you know, you don't necessarily get a clear answer from Rinpoche.
I like the answer. You go into retreat for a year and then we'll talk about it. That's like, imagine if you said that, if your app said, by the way, go into retreat for a year and then you get your next class, that would be funny. Yeah. So go ahead.
And, through conversation, decided that really the path for Andy was to come back to the West and to help people understand their minds as it had helped him understand his mind and deal with suffering and tragedy. And so the practices, the techniques, the tools in Headspace are all rooted in, that lineage, which has been passed down for, over millennia.
Yeah.
So throughout our content, it's deeply woven, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, of course, in a secular way.
Sure.
And so, no, you can't skip one to, can't skip a level. There's no extra, you don't get extra points and you skip a level. But of course there's a, as you said, it's probably not going to fly if you focus on the challenging aspects of mind as a way to get folks to start, and also to, particularly at the beginning, to continue. But this is something I make a real point of in the practices that I teach in the app, and both, off the platform as well. Is that life is messy. It's really messy. It's complicated. We're complicated. We're messy. And just hearing you talk about the Four Noble Truths, it's like if you don't take time to understand each, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. It's
also the definition of samsara, right?
Right.
Literally, just go around and around.
Exactly. You just go round and round and round expecting that things will change, and they just won't. And so I, of course, there are thousands and thousands of apps out there now, and all offering different interpretations and things of these practices, some more rooted in lineages than others, but it's always, and it's so important to Andy especially, and me now, as I'm doing more, taking more from, over, not taking over from him, but he's stepping back a little bit, focusing on his family, and I'm deeply committed to, and not only, I'm protective of, these aren't things that just some folks made up 20 years ago. There's a reason they've been around for as long as they have, because they work. And you have to confront the dark side of the mind, and with joyous aspects that meditation can bring.
It's a funny thing that happens to teachers, which is, I have a particular affection for oracles my whole life. I just love that principle of, like, somebody opens a deck of cards, and like, I've had housewives in Westchester open a deck of tarot cards and tell you stuff that, like, make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I'm not talking about somebody who's got some cities, just somebody, a housewife who happens to be intuitive. And then I met the two oracles of the Dalai Lama through Corky, again, Tendril, which was, the Nichtern oracle, and Khandro Sarima, who's one of the female oracles. And there's something about, and I had this kind of conversation with them, ordinary conversation. And then I've seen them do what they do, which is not ordinary from a conventional point of view, but just the idea that you're a channel in a sense. And, the idea of the radio is not doing anything, actually. The radio just, somebody turns the knob of the radio, and then you get cool jazz or bluegrass or whatever you get. So, not saying that you're becoming an oracle, although we could work on it if you want, is, you're taking these, there's a lot of communication coming through, you're processing it through your own life, your own experience, and then you're opening your mouth and you're talking to, and you, as you said, I was very moved. You said, I'm talking to a blank screen a lot of the time. You can't even see the people in the Zoom session or whatever, but just let it pour through and trust something about the intelligence of the situation, the compassion in the situation, and the intention. It's interesting. Gelek Rinpoche came once to a yoga studio that I was affiliated with, and he walked around and he was going to leave. And I said, let's ask him for some advice, something, and he didn't leave. He said, check your motivation. That was his whole teaching for starting this whole enterprise, this whole kind of business. What is your motivation and intention? And I think that's good advice. That was very seasoned kind of advice. So what's your motivation?
That is such a great point, because this actually comes up a lot in the work we do at Headspace, as a way of putting or posing to members, to subscribers, to folks using the platform, again, why do you want to come back? Why do you want to take care of your mind? Why do you want to take care of yourself? And so for me, my motivation, my intention is, and it stayed pretty consistent. This thread has stayed quite consistent over the years, is I think about how I was before.
Yeah.
And the impact my actions, my behavior would have on other people. And in some cases, it wasn't good a lot of the time.
Okay.
And so that's always there with me. If I'm struggling to practice, if I'm just not feeling like it, think, well, your interactions later in the day might be kinder. You might be a little bit more patient. You might be kinder to yourself, more patient with yourself, less judgmental. And so that's the common thread of just why my motivation.
And Eve, just hearing what you described just in our brief conversation today, you were a wreck. Self-described, you were a mess, and this came along, and it kind of helped you navigate your life in a way that increased your capacity to enjoy your life and appreciate living, and that's enough. That's a great message. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. I was blind, but now I see. That's a sort of theistic version of what we're talking about. But there is some element of I wasn't able to put two steps together on the road of life. And then I found a tool, I found a method that is very ancient, but we've been working hard to make it contemporary. And I just want to pass that through in a very sweet, genuine way and make a decent living while I'm doing it. Why not? Why the hell not,
Right. I've had my financial struggles, big time. And so if I can do something that I'm deeply passionate about and make a living from it, I feel so grateful to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And, just, I think that if I could describe how I was pre my practice, it was that rabbit in headlights, absolute rabbit in headlights. And the Jack in the Box, just like bing, bing, bing. I would just react, and no sense of self-worth. And, over time, that can really have detrimental impact on how you are in the world.
Yeah. Well, that's so beautifully stated. I know you have an appointment to get to caring for your dog, right?
Pedro, I have a little wiener dog.
A wiener? Okay. And is it Pedro? Oh, no, that's
Pedro,
funny.
He's hurt his back a little bit. So
how does a dog hurt their back?
Well, it's down towards his tail. And we actually think that he's a very happy little dog and he loves playing ball. We had some friends watch him when we were away a couple of weeks ago, and we just think he overplayed and overwagged his tail.
Yeah.
And so he can't wag his tail right now.
That is, he wagged his tail and hurt his back. Are you all listening out there? Yeah. That's really a good one. Yeah. Be mindful of your tail.
Happy.
Yeah.
He was
too happy. And he threw his back out. Well, we're sending our best wishes to little Pedro and you. And I would like to I'm going to just come right and say it. I would like you to be a regular guest on the podcast.
I would love that.
Just come back every 2 or 3 months and just check in. Because I think people following your trajectory it could be very harmonious. And I know you wanted to, I always like to invite people to let the viewers and listeners know what they're up to and what's important to you. So is there any program that you're going to be doing that you wanted to just put people onto?
Yeah, we actually have a really exciting collection around women's health coming up, which I'm very excited about. We'll be focusing on sex, relationships, body image, hormones and things. So we'll be working with a number of experts there as well, psychologists. So that's coming up in 2-3 months, I think. And so if folks are interested in using Headspace, would like to try.
Can men take that course?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think men should take that course and just keep their mouths shut and listen.
Yes. Yeah.
That'd be really
Even
good.
So women, folks identifying as women, feminine, but of course it's open to all.
Right. Okay.
And so I have a code if folks would like to check out Headspace. If they haven't, it's EVE 30. So I'm sure you can share that in the notes as well.
Does it just go to headspace.com and then?
Yes. So sorry. Yes. Headspace.com/code.
Okay.
So headspace.com/code Eve 30. And that will give you access for a month, 30 days.
To that program or to anything?
To all of the entire app.
Oh, okay. So including this wonderful women's program.
Yes.
Okay, everybody. We will put that in the trailer attached to it, and that's so ambitious and kind of cool sounding, because it feels fearless in a way to just sort of talk about life the way it is, and not feel like you have to stick to the conventional guidelines of what meditation, what areas it could go into, and how it could affect your life. Just developing that kind of openness. So I'm really thrilled that you're doing that, and it's exciting. This was a great conversation for me. I'm really happy to hear what you're up to, even, and if it's appropriate to say, I'm really inspired by you.
Oh, David, that means so much. I was telling a friend of mine I was doing this podcast coming up, and I was so excited because you've been such a friend and a guide and a mentor to me. So I always love our conversations. I come away feeling so inspired and full of energy. So thank you.
Okay. And thank you. That was Eve Lewis Prieto, and she'll be back. And we'll put all the links into the chat, so onto the scroll attached to the podcast. And so again, thank you so much for being here and sharing your journey with the members of the community out there.
Thank you so much, David.
We'll see you soon.
There you have it, folks. Episode number 35 of the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast on the Be Here Now Network, featuring Eve Lewis in conversation with David Nichtern. We sincerely hope that you have enjoyed this episode and that it is of some benefit to you in your practice in life. So if you like what you heard here today, please, we encourage you to head over to BeHereNowNetwork.com/David, where you can hear all of our podcasts. And in general, we encourage you to head over to BeHereNowNetwork.com to check out all of the amazing podcasts on the BHN network. And it's an incredible repository for the transmission of wisdom traditions in today's medium, the podcast. All right. We would like to thank you and also encourage you to head over to dharmamoon.com to check out our upcoming programming. Depending when you're listening to this, we have a 4-week series, Foundations of Mindfulness, that is running, and I'm very excited to be co-teaching with David for the first time. But we always have lots of programming going. We do several mindfulness meditation teacher trainings each year, where you can deepen your practice and learn how to transmit the practice skillfully and communicate clearly. Right now we have a year-long Buddhist studies program with Evelyn Nichtern that you can hop on quarterly. So check it out. We'd appreciate it if you would like to connect with David and us in community. We are practicing and studying and doing our best to meet the present conditions with skillful means and compassion. All right, everybody. I think that's all the things I'm supposed to say on the end of the episode. Like, hey, if you like our podcast, please head over to whatever platform you use and give us a 5-star review. And yeah, do that. Or tell your friends. And then maybe also look in your friend's eye. Tell them that you care about them and appreciate them. All right, I'm rambling. Are you still listening? It's the end of the podcast. Thank you for listening. May you be safe, healthy, happy, and at ease. All the best.